If you're currently preparing for a job interview or you've been thinking about looking for a new job, then pay attention. I've just gone through a 5-stage interview process for what seemed like it would be the ideal job. Really high pay, completely remote, and a really cool software startup that I could see myself working for. But I flopped the interviews. There was only 2 stages left. One cultural interview with the CEO, and the final round was a live coding challenge with the CTO. I put all my energy and effort into studying and preparing for the live coding challenge, and I assumed that the cultural interview would be a breeze, because it normally is. But what killed my chances was my performance in the cultural interview. So today, I want to share the feedback that I got, the lessons I learned, so that you don't get blindsided the way I did. So in the past, I've done pretty well in the non-technical interviews because my strategy has been to show up and just treat it like a conversation that I would with my friends, to convey that I'm a positive person so that they can see themselves working with me. For the technical interview, they gave me a list of the technologies that they would be testing me on. My strategy was to over-prepare for this. I would try to use those technologies during my tasks in my current job, and after work hours, I'd be learning about them and also be trying to implement them. I wanted to try and mock the interview conditions and predict what they would ask so that I wouldn't be surprised and I would be able to adapt on the spot to the challenges they gave me. So that was my game plan. Safe to say I was more worried about the technical questions than I was about the cultural ones. The experience of the cultural interview was pretty awkward. The CEO was methodically going through a list of questions. Whilst I was answering a certain question, even though I hadn't finished, he would say, I'm going to move to the next question. And then when I tried to answer that, he'd say the same thing, I want to move to the next question. By the time we got to the end of the interview, when it was time for me to ask questions, even though I wasn't finished, he was like, I'm just going to leave it there and good luck for your interview tomorrow, referring to the technical interview. But it seemed like by that stage, he was pretty disinterested. It wasn't receptive like the other culture interviews I've had in the past. After the interview, I was like, okay, I can't control how I did. It's all in the past. I'm going to try and ace the technical interview so that perhaps they'll vouch for me due to my performance there, or perhaps it's going to outweigh my performance here, or maybe it was all in my head and I really did do a good job. So I'm just going to focus on what I can focus and keep on studying and to keep on preparing. But I got a call half an hour later and they told me that they decided not to go ahead, to forget about the interview that was already scheduled for the final stage. And I was pretty disappointed. I wrote them an email, I asked for feedback. When the feedback came a few days later, I thought, hey, this is actually really fair feedback, and I would not have known this or wouldn't have thought about it or prioritized it if it weren't for this interview. So let me just read the feedback out. The first point was, on a communication level, your answers and thought process could have been more structured, and you're often jumping around a lot, which made it harder to take a compelling, clear picture of your relevant skills and past experience that demonstrated the relevant skill being addressed in the question. So I think that's very fair. It shows that they were asking questions to find evidence that I had specific skills. This is quite different to my assumption where I thought the questions were just to reveal like if you're a cool person, if you could just hold a conversation. I guess from that perspective, my standards were pretty low because I thought this was just like talking back and forth. You want to be positive or not. You can understand what they're saying, etc., etc. It's actually really true. I was actually jumping around a lot because I was treating it like a friendly conversation where I guess that's what you do when you chat to friends. You sort of like, you go from one topic to the next and you just go down rabbit holes and you get to know the person or you just get to explore interesting topics, etc., etc. But in this case, there seemed to be a pretty specific agenda, and it sort of explains how my approach wouldn't be satisfactory because they were after more than a vibe. The second part of that first point, this comes down to practice, not just for interviews, but in any sort of structured communication setting. I really appreciate how it includes how you would actually improve on this. The answer is to practice being concise, being to the point when necessary. I think there are situations where vibing and not being super logical has its place, but I've since learned that there are times when you really just want to be no BS and to the point, concisely convey what they're looking for when they're looking for something very specific, in this case, specific skills. The bit where it's like, not just for interviews, but in any sort of structured communication setting. So since then, when I've had my stand-ups at work, when I'm giving an update for what I did yesterday or what I'm about to do today, I'm trying to be concise and just clear and to the point with my answers. And I think this is a skill that I need to develop with practice. I will admit that I realize I tend to sort of not be structured with those and just say whatever comes to mind. So yeah, that's cool. Now, on the second point of feedback I got, the feedback was on the question about the project with the biggest impact on the world or organization. We were looking for people who demonstrated examples of exceptional, concrete impact for the world / the organizations they've been at, and your answer didn't meet the high bar we set here. I think that's very fair enough as well. I don't think that in my career so far, I've done anything with a super high impact or with an extraordinary influence or impact on the world. So that's completely fair piece of feedback. It's also part of the reason why it was hard to answer this question concretely. One, it's because I don't think I've done something with such a huge impact, but two, with the projects that I've completed and the tasks I've done at work, I tend to approach my work from a skills first point of view. My overarching career strategy is to focus on the skills that are hard to acquire, the difficult skills, and the ones that generally correlate with being in high demand and being difficult to learn. With this approach, I can feel confident that I'd be able to land a job which requires the applicant to have skills A, B, C, and D. That's the extent to which I strategize. I acquire these skills, I try to get experience working on them in projects and develop competency with them. I don't calculate or maintain awareness of the quantifiable impact of my work. If you ask me right now, what's the quantifiable impact of the work that you've done over the last year? I don't keep that in mind. I don't have the numbers for you. I'm quite ready to talk about what I've learned. I'm quite ready to talk about the story and the challenges and the technical hurdles, etc., etc. But in terms of like the end result, I can talk about that a bit, but maybe not concretely enough to do so in a very effective way. So that feedback is 100% relevant. Now, I really like how the second part of the second point, just like the second part of the first point, talks about how to actually go about addressing this gap. So it goes, the way to solve this is to think carefully about the purpose and the ambition of the projects you take on next, and to make sure you constantly focus on driving value towards them and demonstrating in your answer by explaining the project, your contributions and impact with references to specific data, stories, or stories of end users, etc., that clearly show the impact that you had. I think next time around for a non-technical interview, I will try to technically know the quantifiable impact and user stories that really show that. I think this is a really good tip. I think it's important because I haven't emphasized and prioritized this type of thinking before, but when you think about it, it makes so much sense. You want to be able to convey the impact that you had and the actual concrete positive outcomes about your work. But up until now, I've really had a skills emphasized and skills first mindset, which has taken me so far. But I think looking forward, I'm definitely going to be considering the quantifiable impact. Basically, to sum up, 1, know when to be concise, know when to be to the point, and understand that cultural interviews can also be about tangible and concrete outcomes and conveying that you have specific skills, as opposed to just a general vibe, a friendliness, a positive attitude. And 2, when communicating about your past experience and projects, not only emphasize the skills and the ability to learn, but also the quantifiable and concrete impact you had in terms of financials, in terms of the end users, in terms of the change, the cultural changes to organizations, etc., etc., etc. And if you keep those in mind, then you won't make the same mistake that I did and underestimate the non-technical cultural interviews. So hope that was useful, and I'll catch you guys on the flip side.